right now for brands to rise above all of the content garbage that is out there has never been better than it is right now. Because people look at AI as the easy button, that it's just going to pump out garbage. That's exactly what's going to happen.
Welcome to Content Kingdom. This is your backstage pass to the people, tools, and the trends shaping the future of content marketing.
And welcome back to Content Kingdom. I am your host, David G. Ewing, and today's guest can make wasted marketing efforts disappear. Jimi Gibson is the Vice President of Brand Communication at Thrive Internet Marketing Agency, which is a 7-time Inc. 5000 company. And it's grown from a scrappy startup to 200 people, and it is a marketing powerhouse. Before Jimi was crafting conversion-ready messaging, he was captivating audiences as a professional magician. And that sleight-of-hand sensibility inspired his proprietary Magic Script framework, a brain-based messaging system that helps brands cut through the noise and spark curiosity and convert. He's a member of the Forbes Agency Council, a TEDx speaker, author of Chasing Carrots, and host of the Somebody Show podcast, where he shares insights on purpose-driven entrepreneurship. But what really sets Jimi apart is his conviction that great marketing is equal parts head and heart. I'm excited to talk to Jimi today. There's a lot to learn from this man, and we're going to pack as much as we can in the time we have together. Jimi Gibson, welcome to Content Kingdom. Your presence here is simply magical.
Oh my, that's quite the introduction. I'm not sure I can live up to that, David, but I'm looking forward to our chat for sure.
Great. So, hey, long before you were in marketing, long before you were the VP of brand communication and an author and a podcaster, you were a magician. And if I understand it correctly, you became a magician like around the age of 4. Is that correct?
Well, you've done your homework. Yeah, I was digging through some boxes a couple of years ago and I found this little membership card to Merlin's Mail Order Magic Club. And I flipped it over and had my little name typed in there. And yeah, I did the math and I was 4 years old and I thought, wow, that's kind of early to get hooked on something like that. But yeah, it's just been fun my whole life.
So walk me through some of those early days. I mean, tell me, what was it about magic that really kind of like lit up your synapses, man?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that was a 4-year-old thing where I guess my parents had signed me up and I got stuff in the mail. And you know, for those of you out there, Amazon was not around back in those days. So you had to wait like 6 to 8 weeks. There was no Amazon Prime. And when it showed up, it was like, you know, Christmas Day. Oh my gosh. Then I got a magic kit when I was 6 years old. And I don't know whether it was just the working with your hands, the puzzle, something that, you know, people didn't know how it worked. And so it was a little bit of, you know, secrets behind the scenes. You know, my parents would have a yard sale and I would kind of pull the crowd over and sell them a ticket for 25 cents and do a little magic show for them on the spot. And then in middle school, I was doing birthday party shows for my friends and their parents would pay me. And I was like, whoa, this is kind of cool too. And then in high school, I think that's where it started to turn into like a business mindset. And I thought, wow, this is something I've loved since I was just a little kid. Can you actually make a decent living at this? And there's a sort of a community of magicians that people don't know about, and there's local clubs. And so I would attend that local club, and there was a guy there that worked at an ad agency. He was an account executive, and he said that there was a brand, pretty large international brand that we've all heard of, that they wanted a performer to help with some promotional shows. And would I be interested? And I was like, yeah, sure. And so I got to hang around the ad agency and I did those shows. And while everybody else was working retail and maybe cutting grass, I was doing these shows. And I think there's a performance aspect to it. There's connecting with somebody, giving them that wow experience, seeing the look on their face. And yeah, that relationship lasted for 16 years, being able to do those shows. And so I think it was just sort of these little steps along the way that it was just kind of a cool little toy. And then you get that feedback loop of people like, hey, show me a trick. And, you know, I would say if I bump into people when I go back home that I knew from being a kid or in high school, that's like the first question they ask, are you still doing magic? And yeah, it's just one of those things that I treasure and enjoy doing.
Well, when I was in middle school, my dad got me this book called The Royal Road to Card Magic, and
Oh yeah.
I learned a few tricks out of that book. I had a great time. I tried to use it to pick up girls. It didn't work quite as well at that. Turns out that's not the secret. It's not the royal road to picking up girls. But it was a lot of fun, and I learned some cool tricks, and it worked once. So hey, once is better than
Yeah.
nothing. But okay, so help me understand the pivot then. So you're hanging out with this ad agency and you make the pivot from magic to marketing. And so tell me, what do they have in common besides, just starting with the letter M?
Yeah. And actually, I never thought about that, magic and marketing. I think, my parents were educators. They expected me to go to college. I didn't have any plans not to. And I thought, what in the world am I going to study? And after hanging out at that ad agency, I was like, this is kind of like doing a magic trick because you have to capture an audience. You have to have them lean in. There has to be some intrigue. And then at some point, you have to deliver on that. And so I got fascinated with communication and the psychology of marketing. I think at that point, it was sort of at the tail end of those Mad Men days. And there was this mystique about an ad agency and just seeing those folks in the creative department and what they did. And, the professors in college kind of had that vibe to them. And it is a little bit of a performance. There's things that happen behind the scenes and backstage, and then you sort of bring this campaign out. And I've talked to people who speak multiple languages, and they say that they do this translation process where if somebody asks them a question, they have to sort of translate it into their native tongue, and then it comes back out. And as I started getting into learning more about marketing, I kind of had that same experience where I would translate it into a magic scenario and think about, what is the star of the ad? What is the components that need to be clear so the audience understands what the message is? How are you going to time the presentation of the CTA at the right moment when you've kind of sort of got them at the height of the emotion related to this product or service? And I would say, just like magic, it started to feed one on to the other. It helped me sell my magic show. I think about when I was a kid, everybody had to have a business card. So I sat down and drew a little magician guy and went to the local print shop. And I think I was the only kid in middle school with a business card. And I knew at some level that you had to advertise or you had to let people know about you to get work. And so I thought, well, I could do that for other people. I could do that for companies. And I think that was probably the connection point. And then the structure fell into place. And we can talk about that more as well.
Yeah. Before we talk about that, do you still have any of those business cards from the OG print run?
Funny you should ask that because my wife had a friend. We used to live in Savannah, Georgia, and she had a friend come up for the weekend. And I have a bunch of stuff that I've kept for years and years and years. And I actually found my original business card. I showed it to her and she's like, oh my gosh. And of course I have that card from the Merlin's Magic Club. And I started going through some boxes and there's like a timetable that I can remember every single business card that I have. So I've got to frame them or put them on the wall or do something at some point to sort of chronicle the development of my magic career over the years. Yeah, it's pretty cool to look back at.
Yeah, Jimi Gibson rookie card is not something to shirk at. And, I've got a David G. Ewing rookie card, and those are fun. And I think that's too bad for kind of people today because nobody who does business cards anymore. But that was a fun thing. So okay, so let's get back to the principles of magic and how they apply to marketing. So I mean, our audience are people who do content for a living, and so I think all of us struggle and wonder and are, is this the right thing? Is this the right headline? Is this piece going to work right? And so when you begin to analyze a piece of content, how do you apply your magic framework to content?
Well, let's try something, and I think it'll help the process as we reverse engineer what's going on. So I don't think I ever found out where you live. David, where are you sitting right now?
Right now, I happen to be sitting in Easton, Pennsylvania, but I'm here for the summer. I'm normally in Austin, Texas, if that helps.
Okay, I'm going to Austin next week, so maybe
Oh,
after the
great.
show I can get some tips on what to do.
There we go.
Okay, so Pennsylvania, and is this a home, Airbnb? Is this a second home? Tell me where you are.
So I'm in a home. It belongs to a college professor here at the Great College of Lafayette University, and he's away for the summer, and so I rented his house for the summer. So
And have you been there before?
no, this is the
No,
first
okay,
time.
pretty cool. And you've been there for how long?
We moved in June, and we're moving out next week.
Okay, so
So,
you've probably taken some walks. Is it in a neighborhood?
yes, beautiful neighborhood on College Hill.
Great. Do you have pets? Did you bring those with you?
I did. I brought my big sloppy golden doodle Grifter.
Oh, Grifter, Grifter. All right, let's take a walk with Grifter.
Okay.
And maybe you have a route that Grifter likes. I know our pups always they get to choose the path, and if we try to pull them in the other direction, it doesn't work out too well. But let's go down a different street that maybe you sort of look down and you have noticed a couple of houses, but maybe you haven't investigated them like you have on your normal route. Is that fair?
Okay.
All
Let's do
right.
it.
So we're going down that street, and you pick a house that you find interesting. Have you got one sort of in your mind's eye there?
I do.
Okay. So you kind of remember seeing it, but you don't know all the details. And as you look at that house, you realize that the front door is open. And I'm going to give you a couple of scenarios, and I just want you to think about those, and maybe the listeners can do the same. I think it'll be a fun exercise. The theater of the mind is kind of a cool place to be. So that door is flung open, and kind of up against the inside of the door, you can see it. There's like this stick, and it's not a golf club. It's not something normal. It looks like something out of the yard, almost like a club or something you would drive something into the ground with, or something like that. And you're thinking, that is really weird. I hope somebody hasn't used that to pop the door open. I hope they're not getting robbed. I don't know what's going on. Okay. So that's scenario number one.
Okay.
The next scenario is that door is wide open, and it's kind of like that golden hour of time where, the sun is in the right position. Everything looks cool. And you're like, wow, that's beautiful. I wonder why that door is open. Oh, you know what? I'll bet they're inviting some friends and family over, and they're kind of on the back porch and they're getting things organized. And because they know these people so well, they just left the door open because they know they'll just walk in and, they'll start their time together. That's scenario number two. The third scenario is as you start to kind of look around the yard with that door open, you notice that there's a shovel leaned up against a tree. And you're like, what in the world? And then you look at the yard and there's these little holes that are dug up. And you're thinking, okay, that is about the strangest gardening technique I've seen, but maybe they've dug the holes and they're going to get something to put in the holes, or they're trying to get rid of some gophers or some moles. Like, I don't know. So that's the third scenario. And then the last scenario is that door is open and the sun is actually in a little different spot than we talked about before. And it's angled in right on that floor. And that floor, it looks like they've just had the floor done because it is just shining like diamonds. And the sun is reflecting off of that. It's just a beautiful scene. Which one of those scenarios sounds more in line with what you imagined in your head?
So the question is, of those four scenarios, which one's the closest to the one I originally imagined? Is that?
Or as I was talking through, which one are you drawn to? There's no right or wrong answer, by the
Okay.
way. So
Well,
yeah, you've got this stick leaned up against the inside of the door. You've got the door
yeah.
open and maybe some friends and family. You've got the shovel leaned up against the tree. And then you've got this floor that's just sparkling.
Yeah. I thought the question so I was thinking ahead and I'm like, what question is he going to ask me at the end of this? Cause I'm on the spot. And I thought, I thought you were going to ask me, which one would I most likely walk into the house in? And
Yeah.
I was thinking the first one is the one I walk in the house in because somebody could be in trouble, right? And I could save the day or help. Whereas the other three, like, I don't want to go crash someone's party. If somebody's in the middle of digging up their weird lawn, and I don't want me and my dog traipsing in on their house. So I would go I would go in on the first one, but I wouldn't go in on the other three. So
Okay.
how does that square?
Well, that's your choice.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and walk up that sidewalk. And there's actually 13 steps from the sidewalk to the porch before you get there uh, onto the porch. So how many steps do you get up before somebody calls out, "Hey, what are you doing?"
Maybe four.
4. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So some of you may be listening. Some of you may be watching. I don't know if you know this or not, but I've got a table. Let me bring it into view here. There's a deck of cards that's been on this table the whole time. We'll just keep this in frame. And if I take these cards out, it was interesting that you said the first one, because if I go through those scenarios, that club leaning up against the wall is a suit in a deck of cards, the clubs. The next one, where the friends and family were coming, were hearts, right? Because it shows love. The next one with the shovel leaned up against the tree is a spade, right? So shovel, spade, digging holes. And then the last one, I use the language of that floor was shining like diamonds. So we have the 4 suits. And then I said there are 13 stairs. Well, if you use ace as 1, there are actually 13 cards in each suit, ace through king, right? Jack being 11, 12, the queen, 13 is the king if we go aces low. So you said that you would get up to stair number 4. So I actually turned over a card in this deck before we ever started. I've got a little bit of lag on the video here, so we'll wait. I'm going to see if I can get this. There's one card and one card only that's turned around. And that would be pretty wild if it was the 4 of clubs.
That would be extremely wild.
So if we can get that to focus there we go. All right. So we didn't plan that. That was totally off the cuff. Let's break that down, and I think that will help. And, interesting for the people who are listening, you may have followed that story in a different way. You may have picked something completely different. You may have gotten up a different number of stairs. I thought it was interesting how you said that would be the only one that I would approach. And then I asked you to approach the house, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's some element, and, this is not what we call in the magic world a cold reading, but you obviously have care and concern. You are not afraid to intervene if necessary. A little bit apprehensive. You only got up to the 4th stair, but it's a cool story. I could have just simply said, hey, pick a card, and been very procedural and didn't have any story against it. And right. So, if you repeat this encounter with somebody else, you'll go, oh my gosh, yeah, Jimmy did this trick and we went through this whole thing, and you'd be able to repeat that story because story is a structure that we fall into.
Okay.
The 3 components of this structure are connection, curiosity, and conversion. And those activate different brain chemistry. And so there's also something that happens when you are telling a story. The person listening to the story actually has a similar brain activity to the person telling the story. And so that's like this connection point, this sync up. And I started the story by asking you where you were. I asked a number of questions about where you're sitting. You let me know that you usually are in Austin. I mentioned the fact that I'm traveling to Austin next week, and maybe you can give me some tips. Then you talked about a professor. I asked if you'd been there before. We talked about walking. And so I'm making a connection there, right? I am
Right.
letting you know that I care about this conversation. And so when that happens, your brain actually has neurotransmitters that are released, and that's the release of oxytocin. And that's this sort of feel good. I like where this is going. I'm intrigued. Let's see where this conversation can go, right?
Okay.
And then we could have gone on chatting like that, but I know that I've got this illusion that I want to perform. And so I need to move to the next phase, which is curiosity. And
Okay.
so I start telling this weird story about this house. And you're trying to picture the scene as I'm describing it, just like the folks who are listening online here. And that is piquing your curiosity. You don't know where this is going, right? You said yourself you were trying to figure out what question I'm going to ask.
Right.
I kept those little segments pretty short. I didn't want to drag it out because I know we have a time limit, right? So I'm reading the crowd. And then at some point, I can't extend that curiosity to the point where you're like going, okay, I'm totally lost. I don't know where this is going. So typically 3 to 4, maybe 5 little segments is about all that somebody can handle. And I'm thinking more in a time frame. And then I've got to produce some magic, right? Now, I didn't announce before that we were going to do a magic trick. I just said, let's try something out.
Right.
If I were a magician on stage, then there's a formal expectation that a magic trick is coming. And so as we start to talk, I break down and I recap basically what happened, right? So we had these 4 stories. I ask you which one. I was already going to ask you to walk up to the front, but you sort of gave me that, right? You said, this is the only one that I would approach. I said, okay, great. Let's walk up. And to you, that may have seemed like, oh, wow. Okay. Was that planned? Did he just think of that right that moment? Like, what's going on? And then I start to reverse the choices that you made that ended up being a card trick. We had the clubs. You picked the club leaning up against the wall. That made sense to you. You went up the 4th step. There are 13 cards. And so naturally, it makes sense that that's the 4 of clubs. Like there shouldn't be any argument that I'm trying to change the story or make something like it definitely is not the ace of spades, right?
Right.
And then I'm sort of holding that tension. I'm going, wow, there's one card that's turned over. Let me get this in focus. And you're sitting there leaning in going, it can't be, it can't be, it can't be. And then when I turn it over, there's a release. And so that curiosity component is actually a release of dopamine. And we've heard about, dopamine addiction with social media. It's actually not the addiction to social media. It's actually the expectation of a reward or closure. And so when you post on social media, you're expecting a reward of somebody liking, sharing, commenting on that post. But if you stay in that heightened state, that's an uncomfortable place to be. So when I turn over the card to the 4 of clubs, that's a release of serotonin, which is that everything's right with the world. I know how this, it all makes sense now. That was a weird story, but I get it. And now you're sort of able to recreate that in your head. And so that's the exact same structure of a marketing conversation. And, we can break that down in simple terms, but maybe I'll stop there and ask for your experience as I was going through that and tell me how that felt to you.
So I think that's fascinating because yes, there's. I'm still trying to get past the wonder of like how did that work, which is it's just very distracting. I will tell you about this, but as I'm going through this with you, because the audience doesn't know that you and I did not collaborate ahead of time. Where I'm like 4, no, I wasn't. I just came up with 4 out of thin air, and that is so cool. But okay, let's go back and unpack that. So yes, there was the connection piece, and it is amazing. I mean, I ask questions for a living, and it never ceases to amaze me that if someone just asks a few simple questions, where are you from, what you doing, and before you know it, I'm talking about my dog, and there's a connection there, right? Like that was great. The curiosity is definitely something I did feel because it was a weird story. It's almost like a little choose your own adventure, and it was fun to hear you talk about these different things. And I was wondering, like, where is this guy going with this? And so that was really, really curious. And then there was that moment of kind of like aha wonder for me where there was that rising tension. I was leaning in, and I'm like, is he really going to be able to pull this off? Is he really going to get, this 4 clubs and pull this together? And I thought it was really cool that that it was there. So yes, so I felt like I got all the parts of the framework, and I experienced all of them, and I thought that was really neat. So I love it. And so, can you give me an example of how someone does that in marketing? Or maybe a story of something that was a home run ball for you. Like, how is that turned into that 1, 2, 3 wham in content for you?
Yeah. And I think probably the most ignored portion of this framework is the curiosity point.
Okay.
I'm looking at your body language whenever I do a performance, and there's a little obviously separation between screen here, but we call it sitting on the edge of your seat. That's a theatrical term for what it is, right? You're not looking at your phone. You're not talking to the person beside you. You have rapt attention. There was a little bit of a lean that I saw as we were going through that. And I think, especially, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, and I'm sure we've all experienced this, where there's a connection request. Interesting that they call it a connection request, right? And nobody gets the opportunity to know you. They just go straight to the close. They go straight to the conversion. And that feels icky, right?
Yeah.
So why do you think that's appropriate? And so let's just use a plumber. That's a pretty benign example. I think we can all relate to having plumbing problems. There is a component to this where we actually have to choose what is the magic that we want to perform for our audience. And I use audience specifically because I believe if it's a customer or a prospect, there is a level of performance that has to happen because you have to respect the fact that you are engaging in this interaction. And if you boil down all magic tricks, they fall into 13 classic effects. That could be a vanish, that could be a transformation, that could be a levitation, that could be a prediction, right? First, you have to pick, and I'd like to maybe choose another way. How do you get started in actually telling what you want to tell? So we can hold that for a little bit later. But so you have to pick an effect to begin with. So I would say if we talk about plumbing, the most obvious thing that you may think if you're in marketing for a plumbing company is we make clogs disappear. And that's a very transactional thing. Like, you got a clogged drain, we're going to come out and make it disappear. Aren't we great? But what if we took it into this more fun and intriguing relationship of a prediction? And what if I said, we see the warning signs before your drain backs up, so you don't have to deal with an emergency ever again? You're like, what? How is that possible? So if we just follow that magic script from the beginning of that communication. So, and again, I'm not applying this to a social media post. I'm not applying this in any specific way. We can talk about that. But what if the first interaction is, why do clogged drains always happen right before guests arrive or just as you're running out to work? Like, how does that change? What that says to your audience is, we get you. We've been in your world. We know the pain. And immediately you go, finally, somebody understands that the in-laws are coming and this is not going to be pretty if we don't get this drain unclogged, right? And so now I've got your attention. You are saying, oh, all right. That's just one sentence, just a quick thing. It's not schedule your appointment for a $99 service call, right? It's connection. Then what if we say, what if you never had to deal with a plumbing emergency again? Well, nobody's saying that. You're thinking in your head, how is that possible? Are you going to have a technician sitting on my step and every time I have a clog, they're just going to run in the door and fix it? So now we have to close that need for a reward or fulfill that curiosity door that we've opened up, right? So something as simple as, with our 20-point pipe inspection health check, we predict problems before they happen and we give you a plan to stay worry-free. Would you like us to come out and do our 20-point inspection? happy to schedule time. We've got some time this Friday.
Well, what I really like about that is, yeah, it's so much more concrete, right, than just saying what everyone else says.
Yep.
It totally sets you apart. And also, if I'm in the moment where, and funny enough, we just had a plumbing catastrophe here at this house that we're renting. You know, even if I'm in the catastrophe, I'm way more apt to pick the person who is thinking ahead an extra step than I am just the break fix, because they're all going to say break fix, and now I'm back to price, right? And I'm just like, well, which
Yep.
one's the cheapest? So, so it is very compelling. So, in terms of what you just did there, like, and I don't know if this is revealing the magician's secret, but you took something that was a disappearing type trick and turned it into a prediction type trick, and saying,
Yep.
hey, by making this a prediction type trick, can say something far more interesting in a space where me and every other plumber kind of has the same, we have access to the same employees, we have access to the same equipment, we have access to the same stuff, but I'm just approaching it a little bit of a different way. Is that part of this, or did I just reveal the
Yeah, because you
magician's
have to
secret?
think through, like, what is the worry? Um, what is the thing that keeps people up at night?
Mm-hmm.
Plumbing is a great example. Your car is another good example.
Yeah.
We typically don't know what's under the ground, what could potentially be lurking beneath the surface, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, depending on the area of the country where you live, you're either going to deal with roots, you're going to deal with frozen pipes, you're going to deal with septic tank issues, you're going to deal with the fact that the county or municipality doesn't cover anything that's in your yard. They will only cover when it goes to the street. And so you're worried that there's this something that's going to happen. And so that prediction effect is looking into the future and going, we can predict that something is probably going to happen in the future, but what if you didn't have to worry about it? And so you're taking away all of that, and it becomes less transactional and more relationship based. And they're going to be in it with you through the long haul, as opposed to, yeah, just call us every time and we'll just send you a bill every time we come out and fix it.
Yeah. And what you've done there is you've tapped into some really strong emotional concerns, right? The fear and the uncertainty and the doubt,
Yep.
um, and taken that away. So that's kind of that's really, it seems to me like the transaction at the end of the curiosity, right? Is the close becomes the real pain, which is those feelings, which is where it really hurts. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah. And, I wouldn't say this is an easy thing to do. It sounds simple, but you just have to really know your customer. And if for the plumbing instance, if you know that most of your calls end up being this type of service call, then you can focus your energies on alleviating future worry. Maybe you don't even have a subscription plan, but the business would start one because they see that this is the angst in the faces of the customers that they go visit. And they go, if we're really passionate about this business, and we want to have long-term customer value, and we want referrals, and we want good reviews, we should be able to pull off magic for these, customers. So I think it's multifaceted.
I love that. And yeah, I think that, what's really interesting about this approach is that it gives you a creativity toolkit, right? I
Mhm.
mean, right after we get off this, I'm going to go look up the 13 kinds of magic tricks, and be like, all right, so I've got software and I make this disappear, but now I'm going to try, like, what if it's a different kind of trick? And therefore,
Yep.
what would that look like? And try the different tools. And that's some magic, man. You've really delivered there. That's really wonderful. So, um, so, there's another thing that, well, actually, I've got two questions I want to ask you. So I'm only going to ask you them one at a time. The
Okay.
first one is, you're a guy who lives the message. And what I mean by that is, I went to your LinkedIn page and I started going back through time, looking at your posts. And I think I read somewhere that you post every single day. And I thought, well, let's just see, like, how consistent is this guy, right? And you're batting 1,000, man. As far back as I went, it looks like you post every single day. Am I wrong about that?
That is true. And I used to not post every single day, but I thought I need to exercise a muscle. I need to practice what I preach. I was not good at video. I made a commitment that I would post a video every day. Um, I was going to do it all year, but I started looking at my metrics and realizing I could deliver. So, when you get into these platforms and we're talking about content, I think it's an important point. Um, some platforms are pushing different types of content. When I started, LinkedIn was pushing video. They have backed off of that. And so when I started to look at my impressions and my metrics, I realized that those videos were not serving anybody. And so I did 137 videos this year, and I don't regret that one bit. But carousels, cheat sheets, other visual and written types of information is getting more traction. And so I can teach the same things that I want to teach in a different format. And you just have to be able to pivot. I would say Instagram and TikTok are the ones that are really pushing video now. Am I ready to go do that? Maybe, but I'm committed on LinkedIn right now. So yeah, I would say it's uncomfortable at first, but if you're going to be a content marketer, you just got to get over the apprehension of, launching content.
And that's incredible. And the insight there is pretty amazing, because I have noticed that you've pivoted. But what I am most impressed by is, I was looking, anybody who posts every single day, I'm always skeptical. I'm like, well, they probably post every day, but it might be kind of, they mailed it in a few times, or it's, the content gets watered down after a while. But I went through to try and check, and you keep up a very strong stream of quality, where kind of there's a great takeaway in every post. So I wanted to know, could you tell us a little bit about your system? I mean, how do you make sure that you have that level of consistency, high frequency, and high quality? How are you doing that?
It's all the mileage on all the things that I've been through. And I just kind of have to put myself in the mindset. We're a full service digital marketing agency, right? And so there's 1,000 things that I could talk about SEO. There's 1,000 things that I could talk about paid media. There's 1,000 things I could talk about video production, writing a blog post, all of those types of things. And so I literally just sit here and take a tour of all of the things that someone who wants to learn more about marketing should know about the right way to do it. There are many people out there who like to hide behind the curtain and don't share the real deal about what's going to get you results. I just feel that's disingenuous, and you should help people with the knowledge that you have. And so to me, it's a way of giving back. It's a way of saying, we've been in business for 20 years. We have 1,000 active clients. I have a pretty interesting purview on what works and what doesn't work. And it's my responsibility to just be able to share that. And so what I do is I sit down and I brainstorm, what are all the things that I want to talk about? And so I volunteered to write a blog post every month for our website, which we put out way more than that. I produce a 20-minute teaching video about that blog post. I applied to write at Forbes. I applied to write at Entrepreneur. I forced myself into a situation where I had to come up with meaningful content. And so, yes, I brainstorm with AI. I practice hooks. I do all of that. There are checks and balances with Forbes and Entrepreneur. You cannot submit anything that was written by AI. So, you have to, buckle down and do it the old fashioned way. But I would say it's no different than what we've read. You have content pillars, right? My content pillars are related to our full service business. I'm an executive. I have things that I talk about related to leading teams. And so just map those out and then look at your month and you go, you know what? If you're not producing any content right now, do something once a week. And if you're interested in video, film 10 videos and throw them all away until you get those butterflies out. I would say the opportunity right now for brands to rise above all of the content garbage that is out there has never been better than it is right now. Because people look at AI as the easy button that is just going to pump out garbage, that's exactly what's going to happen. If it's not relevant, you're not going to get any feedback on it. Google has an acronym, EEAT: experience, expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. If you can demonstrate, if you can identify subject matter experts within your company and you can help them produce content, you're going to be way ahead of other businesses. So back to my process. So I have these content pillars. I have a spreadsheet that I map out what I want to talk about. I write the script. I write the post that's associated with it. And then I batch produce the content so that I don't have to sit in front of the camera every single day. The other thing that I do is I make sure that my friction to getting on camera or doing whatever it is the shortest path possible. So I learned a lot about lighting. I learned a lot about cameras. I learned a lot about these other things. And I can literally walk into my office and be set up to shoot a video in less than 5 minutes. And so there's no excuse for me to go, oh, well, it takes too long to set up and I got to move my desk. I mean, I had tripods all over my office and I was tripping over them. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way. So what did I do? I went to YouTube. I now have, bars that hang from the wall and the ceiling and I can walk under them and, all these types of things. So I'm kind of rambling at this point, but I would say have content pillars, have a plan, track it on a spreadsheet, and then just be okay with being bad and get better and critique yourself, have somebody else critique you. When I started doing video to begin with, I had my wife look at some of the videos and she was like, what in the world are you doing with your eyebrows? I'm like, I don't know. And so I had to correct that, because being on stage and being in front of an audience is a lot different than staring at your computer screen or being in your head writing something. So I don't know, maybe there's some nuggets in there that would help folks. And I'm happy if something triggered another question, I'm happy to answer that.
Well, I think that, yeah, there's a couple comments too. Like wives are great about eyebrows. Mine's always on my case about mine. So I look back at my wife eyebrows and yeah, they're kind of hilarious. So if she's listening to this one, thanks, Laura. Anyway, but no, we probably need to wrap up. And there are a couple things. There's actually still like 7 questions that I have, but there's only 2 that I really want to get to though. Okay. And so the first one is about more of a magic topic as it applies to marketing, which is a topic I don't understand, which is hypnosis. So, I know that you've dabbled a little bit with it. Is there any connection, or am I just making that up, that maybe there's a connection? I mean, I don't get hypnosis. So how does it connect to marketing?
Well, that was an interesting point in my career. I actually went to a comedy club and saw a hypnotist, and being in the magic world and carrying around all these props. And I was like, wow, that guy just did 2 hours with no props. And so I actually studied and learned and had some training. And I was a hypnotist for about 10 years. And I think it goes back to the psychology, the power of suggestion, the phrasing. The people that would volunteer for the show would be the people that would end up being most susceptible. It's not fake. I've been under myself. I would say the only relation that I have to marketing and hypnosis is the language and the structure. And so part of the induction process in hypnosis is you're taking people through, and there's many different varieties. I'll mention one is progressive relaxation, where you're basically telling the volunteer what's happening physiologically in their body. And when they internalize that and go, oh my gosh, he's right, that causes a deeper level of susceptibility. So again, that's probably a longer topic, but that's a quick answer. I'm just fascinated with the whole thing, and I've used it for myself for relaxation and goal setting. And it is a direct feed to the subconscious, and a lot of marketing and advertising triggers root emotions in the subconscious. So I would say that's a connection point.
Yeah, that is fascinating, and probably several episodes just on that. So we'll have to have you back one day, Jimmy, for that one. But
sure.
Okay, so final question, and then we'll wrap up. And that is, we've talked a lot about content and this methodology as it applies to human beings. We've talked about the human psychology. We've talked about dopamine and, all these different chemicals in the brain.
Yeah.
We're entering a phase where AI is, gathering information and serving it up and presenting it. So it's a little bit more arm's length from where we are today. And so I'm curious to know, how should content marketers be thinking about all the different things that you're talking about and then applying it to a world where, where AI is, maybe crawling some of their content and bringing it back, and they don't quite get to have that connection all the way to the end customer the way they did before. How do you approach that?
Yeah, I mean, the latest topic related to that is these AI agents who can actually go visit the website for you and bring back the results or set appointments or whatever the case may be. I would say that is more like a personal assistant, and the decision-making process in a large language model is actually a broader look at the brands. So typically in a keyword search, it's you put in your keyword search, it goes out, and based on ranking, it's going to return back the best option for you based on geographic location, keyword profile, all of those things, domain authority. What an LLM does is it actually will do that first query, and that will start to fan itself out. And almost like the branches of a tree, it is looking for many, many more connection points to create this profile of the best opportunity to solve that problem. And so the other thing that's happening is we're seeing they're very personalized. So you could search for information about a trip. I could search for information about a trip, and it knows our preferences related to our past behaviors. And so I think it goes back to what I said before. The more authentic and the more pervasive you can have information about you out there, and we're talking about PR mentions, we're talking about articles about you, backlinks are going to be a little bit different if there's no contextual reason why your link would appear on a certain website. That's going to confuse those LLMs. Customer reviews, there's certain language in those customer reviews. They can detect negative and positive sentiment for the brand. And so I would say from a content marketing perspective, we're actually seeing now where organic results from TikTok and Instagram are showing up in these search results. We talk about content distribution. Just make sure it follows that expertise, authority, experience, trustworthiness, and is a little more diverse, and look at offsite things that give positive sentiment towards your brand and shows your level of authority and experience related to your product or service or whatever it is. As long as you do that, we've seen clients still getting good results from their white hat approach that they've done in the past. We just need to layer in some more of these things. One thing that we're seeing is a lot of these, and this may be something that's just a flash in the pan, but listicles, if you can get ranked for the top 10 XYZ, whatever product or service, those are often searched. Reddit threads are searched. Again, customer reviews are searched. So yeah, I would say it's just a broader perspective and a bigger footprint for your brand.
Fascinating. And to your earlier point about, there's never been a chance to rise above that's as good as it is now. I'm starting to see why you say that. So, Jimmy, I imagine many of our audience members are going to be just as enthralled with everything and the curiosity and connection that you've created here with me. If they want to connect with you, what is the best way for them to get more Jimmy?
Yeah, well, you hinted at it earlier. I'm on LinkedIn a lot, so connect with me there. Tell me you heard me or saw me on the show. If you have a question, be happy to set up a little hot tea chat or coffee chat. I drink hot tea. And be happy if somebody needs some marketing help. thriveagency.com. Lots of free information there. There's a form you can fill out, or you can just connect with me, and I'm happy to bridge that for you. Or if you just want to get a second opinion and say, I was really confused about this point, could we just chat for a minute? Happy to do that as well.
Oh, that's great. Jimmy, thank you so much for being on Content Kingdom. We're really glad to have had you.
It was fun, David. Thank you.
Favorite book of all time? Kids' books are okay.
Whew. Well, I'm a big fan of the Bible. I read the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, and that was a really interesting perspective. So I love that book.
Do you have any nerdy hobbies?
I was fascinated with robotics when I was a kid. I actually found the first robot that I made in second grade. It was pretty rudimentary. And so I just love tinkering with that kind of thing. So That's pretty nerdy.
Yeah. Coffee, beer, whiskey. Why is whiskey the best?
Well, interesting. My wife has her Whiskey Wednesday t-shirt on, so we will be having some Whiskey Wednesday later. I was introduced to it too late in life, and it's the best because it's just the best.
If you got a new pet today, what would you name it?
Probably Hocus Pocus.
Android or iOS?
iOS all day long.